we're moving on to the next part of our agenda, which is that we're going to hear more from Professor Inge Brouwer. And Inge, I'd like to give you the floor for your presentation. Um,
Yes,
and
thanks, Herman.
towards the end, also after the second presentation of Amy Chua, we'll have a chance to, get into a conversation with Professor Inge Brouwer and Amy. Over to you, Inge.
Thank you, Herman, and also thank you for inviting me. I hope you can see my slides. Indeed, my name is Inge Brouwer. At the moment, I'm working at the CGIAR System Organization, so the same organization as Namakulo is working for. I'm director of the Science Program, Better Diets and Nutrition. So I'm a partner in crime with Namakulo to put diets on the forefront of food system discussions. And well, that's also the starting point, of my presentation. So I would like to go a bit deeper into what a food system approach is, and I will use some examples that from research that we did in support of policy development solutions for food systems towards sustainable and healthy diets. So first of all, what is a food system? Yes. And Namakulo explained this already. It's a very complex interlinkage between elements of a food system. So we talk about people, we talk about inputs, environment, processes, infrastructure, and institutions, and all the activities that are related from production to consumption through processing, distribution, etc., and the outcomes we have to look for, including social, economic, and environmental outcomes. And these are also including then better diets and nutrition. So this food system came to the forefront about 20 years ago, actually in response to dissatisfaction with the production-oriented development programs. And these were mainly based on linear food security thinking. So, but we know that intensification alone, increasing production, as I explained already, will not contribute sufficiently to the eradication of hunger. So soon after the recognition that we have to think more in food system terms, a more holistic framework was developed to capture the complex interaction between all the elements, activities, and outcomes. And this is the HLPE framework that I also depict on the screen. And I think you will continue to discuss about the different frameworks. But as I said already, like Namakulo, our starting point is thinking about the ultimate impact we want to have on diets. And this framework is showing the central role of diets in food system transformation. Now, what makes food systems so complex is that there are many interactions with all the actors that are active in a food system. So producers, food chain actors, retailers, consumers, and they are managing these multiple food value chains of crops that need to be produced for a healthy diet. And they do that in an environment that is changing very rapidly. And they do also at multiple levels. So we are working at global level, at regional level, but also food systems at national level and food systems at city level, the city food systems initiatives that are being developed now. But we can also talk about food systems at community level, and even your own food system can be described. And we also look at multiple drivers. So these drivers, they are also connected with each other, which means that for everything that we are thinking of in changing food systems, we have to think about feedback loops. So changing something in the food environment will have an effect on other components of a food system. And we do have to realize that we have to know these trade-offs, but also synergies to really advise policymakers, what could be the negative and the positive consequences of starting or developing certain policy strategies in their country. So this, because it's so complex, it's sometimes also paralyzing for people because you do not know where to start to change food systems towards preferable outcomes. Having said that, that's the work towards food systems or food systems transformation is always normative. It means that you have an objective in mind that you would like to reach to in your transformation of food systems. And for Namakulo and me, as you know, we have to see it back on the plate. That's a nice slogan. That's our norm. But of course, we do know that there are multiple outcomes. So we have to look at the social and economic outcomes and livelihoods and make sure that whatever is done in the food system, it does not harm these outcomes, but better look for synergies. But I have to warn you, finding these synergies is not very easy. And most of the times there are trade-offs. There are people who see that they are not benefiting from changes, and they would like to, limit changes so that they are less affected, etc. So thinking about feedback loops and trade-offs also means that foresight analysis. So, and the question, what if we are going to intervene? What will happen? What will happen to women? What will happen to youth? What will happen to populations that get less attention or do not have a voice in all these food system discussions? To be able to see these trade-offs and to be able to act accordingly to that. Now, there is an urgent call for future food systems, and that call is still there. I don't think that we have reached already a large relevant reduction in all these negative performances of the food system. So it urges us to continue our efforts to work on food system transformation. And I think everywhere in the world where you have these meetings, it's indeed recognized that we need a food system transformation. It's also recognized that, giving attention to malnutrition or to diets is really important. But it's often used as a political discourse. It's often used in terms of, the food system is broken and we can fix it. But knowing the food system definitions and the complexity of that, there's not something like we can fix it. It's really a very complex route to go. So it's not in every country, but even yesterday I was present at a discussion with the Ministry of Agriculture about policy interventions to improve agri-food systems outcomes. And in the first 50 minutes of the presentations that were given by representatives of the ministry, it was indeed shown that the ultimate ambition was to reduce hunger and malnutrition, or even to eradicate hunger and malnutrition, and also that we should focus on improving diets. But when we went into panel discussions with different NGOs, government representatives, research organizations, you didn't hear back, this focus on improving or reducing hunger and malnutrition. And that's what's often happening. So most of the responses, there are many, on the call of the challenges of food systems and food system transformation, but they are often diverse and they are scattered and they are siloed. And many of the strategies that are being developed are related to improving production and economic development, focusing on closing yield gaps, reducing food losses and waste, and to improve the link between farmers and markets. And you see now in the last years, there is an increased linkage with agroecology because of climate change challenges, looking at the environmental footprint and reducing effects on climate change. But there's still quite little attention given to nutrition and health, and even more or less attention is given to governance of food system transformation and the political economy of governance. And I'm sure that during this course there will be quite a lot of discussions about this, and I think it's really important that we think about it. Even me as a nutritionist should think about this political economy and the unequal distribution of resources leading to trade-offs of changes. So my norm is that diets matter, or Namakulu say we should see it in our plates. Within the CGR, this is a unique perspective, I would say, because most of the programs that are operated in CGR are focusing on increasing production. But we are using reverse thinking, so starting from looking at the diet and the dietary patterns in countries and then working backwards into the food system to find solutions or removing bottlenecks for consumers to actually eat what they need to eat. So starting from the impact is very important. And we do agree it's not only diets. We also have to think about livelihoods and environmental sustainability. But reverse thinking, starting from the impact and then going back into what is actually needed, stimulates out of the box thinking. And it provides room for imagination, I would say, and for new solutions. And it supports constructive dialogue between key stakeholders and groups that did not have a voice before in discussing about agriculture. Now, this is not an easy thing to introduce, and Namakula, we are already working on it for several years. I think at least the last 10 years, I think. And still we hear common narratives in our discussions that don't help, to proceed with to accelerate the agenda. And one of them is that economic growth and reduced poverty will reduce malnutrition in the long term. We have a little bit discussed about it, but of course, economic growth and reduced poverty is not a guarantee for better nutritional outcomes. And we know from examples in Mexico and Brazil and also in South Africa that it can even lead to overconsumption and overweight and obesity and diet-related non-communicable diseases, problems that are rising very quickly, also in low and middle income countries. So closing the yield gap will produce enough food, and I even heard it yesterday again, but the question is whether it will nourish foods. There's a big focus on producing kilocalories, using undernourishment as indicator, for example. But we have to stimulate the economy, but we should not affect the diversity of nutritious foods that are available and affordable to the consumer, because that's what we need to strive for. Then also what's commonly heard is that cereals provide most of the nutrients, and because that is the case, we need to produce more so that people have more access to nutrients. And of course, diets of African and Asian populations are often unbalanced in the sense that they have too many calories derived from cheap staple foods. But eating a lot of staple foods will leave little space for valuable foods that deliver other essential nutrients. And it's important to recognize that staples and other cereal crops are not the best sources of bioavailable iron and zinc, for example, or high quality proteins, and that small amounts of animal sourced food or aquatic foods could easily fill that gap for this nutrient. So a focus on improving cereals production is in that perspective not really helpful. Well, the other convictions are, well, we give what consumers demand, assuming that consumers know what they need, and we are we are all also consumers, and we know that we often demand something that's not always the best for us. And the last one I would like to highlight is the protein transition and the focus on the need for protein transition, because there's an assumption that it will improve sustainability and healthiness of the diets, supporting or promoting the consumption of plant-based diets. But we have to ask ourselves, whether this message will also benefit people who have a plant-based diet, but not by choice. They are compelled to have plant-based diets because they are or they have not sufficient resources to have a little bit of animal source food. So in many countries where we work in, actually the consumption of animal protein should be increased. So we are continually actually going against these common narratives to show how important it is to focus on diets. So if we think that diets is among the important outcomes of food systems, and we are serious for that, so it means we have to introduce consumers and food environment in the discussions of the Ministry of Agriculture, for example, because consumers and food environment are extremely important, on the route towards sustainable, healthy diets. So consumers have, and I always say they have a backpack full of consumer characteristics related to culture, related to their age, related to religion, related to their lifestyle, their taste preferences, the space they have, the kitchens they have, etc. So with this backpack, they go into the food environment. They go to it online, and that's increasing very rapidly. They go to markets, they go to their school, people go to their workplace, they walk around in the community, and they meet the retailers in the food environment. And this food environment is influencing the choice that people can make on what food they are going to eat, what food they are going to buy, where they are going to eat and buy it, etc. And you should be not mistaken. The influence of the food environment is really large on what we are actually consuming. So these are things we really have to also bring into the discussion, to show that it's not only production and bringing it to the market, but that there are other drivers that are important in the food environment that directly related to where consumers are coming, that are determining what people are actually consuming. So, and this is just an example to show that this food environment is actually changing rapidly. So we looked at adolescents, and adolescents group is a very vulnerable group. They are open to a lot of influences. They are under influence of their peers as well. So we looked at adolescents in urban areas and a rural area in Vietnam. And looked at their diets, and what was shown is that their healthy foods intakes are really low, and what was good actually is that the unhealthy food intake was still also low. Yeah, so but when we looked at the food environments, we really saw that the unhealthy foods were much easily accessible than, for example, fruits and vegetables. and also that eating out of home was associated with lower diet quality. So adolescents that had some pocket money um, uh, really consumed diets with a lower diet quality because they were able to buy foods in the food environment and were tempted to buy then the more unhealthy foods. Also on the right side, you see the distance from retail to home. So both in rural, peri-urban and urban areas, you see that the ultra-processed foods and the sugar-sweetened beverages are actually more close to the homes and to the schools of adolescents than the more healthy foods, fruits and vegetables, for examples. So actually, it's like I'm in Kenya. It's like going on safari and you drive through, the national park in Nairobi, but you do not want to go out, of the car because the outside is dangerous. And I think for the adolescents, it's the same. If they go outside of their home or their school, the food environment is somehow becoming dangerous for them to lead to unhealthy diets. So we are looking very urgently for innovations for transformative change. So it's not only looking at food systems as they are, but we look for innovations to transform these food systems to better outcomes. And I think you should zoom in this course also into what does it mean, that we want to transform. Transformation is different than just change. Transformation is intentional, it's radical, and it can be disruptive. Yeah, so in this change, there are many challenges, and there are many potential innovations that are proposed at different levels. But I have to admit that many of these innovations do not have a clear theory of change, how it could lead to better outcomes, and in our case, it's sustainable, healthy diets. And there's still very little evidence on impact, especially on the long run. On the short run, maybe we know impact, but whether this is sustainable, whether the impact will continue, and especially also the differential impact on gender, on men, female, and also girls and boys, for example, is still little understood. And therefore, we need more methods, tools, and indicators to analyze and monitor such complex systems that are needed. So there's still a lot of work to be done. And of course, are these innovations that we are proposing, do they indeed lead to transformative change? Of course, we have to work together with local partners on what is demanded by policymakers. But it's my big question, actually. Okay, if we respond to what policymakers would like to do or would like to know, are we then confirming the existing food system, or are we indeed looking for ways to transform the food system? And I think a nice example is also what is happening now in the Netherlands. We have a new government that will really change, the way we are working in ODA in the Netherlands. So for me, it's really important that we also document and monitor this transformative change. Yeah, do we really transform food systems towards better outcomes with our innovations? Because many innovations that are appearing in a National Action Plan of Food System Transformation, for example, are just old wine in new bottles. Yeah, there's not a lot of change. So people change the narrative, but what they actually do is more or less comparable on what they did a few years ago. So we have to look forward to signals of transformative change. There's the mindset change, to narrative change, is trust changing, is more dialogue taking place. Do you see changes in structures in countries? Do you see changes in patterns, in policy regulations? And of course, do you see change in impact or outcome of food systems? I'm sure I don't have time to go deeper into it, but that these things will be discussed during this course. So this is what I wanted to provide, Herman. So the word is back to you, and I'm looking forward to listen to the next speaker.
Yeah, thank you very much, Inge. I really, really appreciate it. That's a rich level of detail, and also pointing towards more detail that we will probably dive into in the course.